Well, did you know that this week was the anniversary of the premiere of Sesame Street? Did you know that? Its premiere was on November 10th, 1969. Now, that show was a staple in my household growing up. I learned a lot from Big Bird and Grover and Cookie Monster and Oscar the Grouch and the like. And of course, I remember singing, "Sunny days chasing the clouds away." Yes, I hear some of you remember that. On my way to where the air is sweet. Can you tell me how to get to Sesame Street? And it goes on, come and play. Everything's A-okay. As a kid, it felt like a sunny day and that everything was A-okay. Sesame Street was a place where kids learned new things, where we learned about other people and people who might have been different than us. We learned to play together. And do you remember at some point in the show, there would be this voiceover. This episode is brought to you by the letter D and the number 5. Do you remember that? Or whatever letter or number they were emphasizing that particular day. Ah, such memories. Oh, to live on a place like Sesame Street. Last week, we concluded our worship series on stewardship, and in these few weeks between that time and before Advent begins, I'm preaching on the prescribed lectionary texts for the day. And I had planned for this a while back, and on Monday, on the anniversary of the Sesame Street premiere, after I had seen the news about this, I began studying the gospel lesson for today. And in the back of my head, I was thinking about all of that, and I thought, this is nothing. This is nothing like Sesame Street. I might say to you, this sermon is brought to you by the letters A and T for apocalypse and terror. The text tells us of the fall of the temple and of wars and of earthquakes and famines and plagues and all of these dreadful portents from heaven. Well, great. Thank you very much, lectionary. Thank you. This sounds eerily familiar to what is happening all around us, even now. And I don't know about you, but my bandwidth for stressors like this feels pretty limited right now. And I like to come to church to get away from all of the craziness in the world, to get away from all of those stressors, even for just an hour, to be filled with hope, to be given some kind of comfort, to be reminded of God's presence, God's love, God's peace. What about you? Do you feel like that? As I think about the state of our nation right now, I can continually remind myself, don't feed the fear. Don't feed the fear. Maybe we need to post signs like that. Like the signs that we see in the national parks that say, please don't feed the bears. We'll change the B to an F. And we have, please don't feed the fears. Please don't feed the fears. If you get nothing else from the message today, let it be, don't feed the fear. Now, you may not hear that message of don't feed the fear when you first read this text from Luke. But I promise, by the end of this message, you will be saying the words, don't feed the fear. And we might even have a voiceover that says, today's message brought to you by the letters C and H for comfort and hope. So let's take a brief look at this text. We begin here with Jesus in the temple. He's in Jerusalem. Now, the temple was this enormous place. The building itself was about the size of a football field. And then if you include all of the courts that were around the temple building itself, it was about the size of 28 football fields. It was huge, well over 1 million square feet. It was this feat of ancient architecture and engineering. The temple was beautiful, stunning, really. And it had recently been refurbished by Herod the Great. And apparently, the work had been done very well. This rebuilding project had taken 80 years to complete. Can you imagine that, Marge, when we renovated the sanctuary here? No. It had taken 80 years to complete. And it included new foundation and walls that significantly enlarged the temple. And Herod, of course, spared no expense. He employed the most talented artisans to use the best materials for this project, like white marble that was up to 67 feet long. 6'7" feet long, 12 feet high, 12 feet wide. There were tapestries made of fine linen that were a veil at the entrance. He installed gold and silver-plated gates and gold-plated doors throughout the temple building itself. It was beautiful. So Jesus is there in the temple, interacting with the people who are there, who are admiring this beautiful work of art, looking at this beautiful architecture and all of the gifts, considering all the gifts that had been given and dedicated to God to build this thing. When Jesus delivers this horrible news, the temple will soon be completely destroyed. What? What? How can that be? You can imagine their surprise hearing this news about this beautiful, this enormous, this amazing building that had taken so long to create that it was about to be destroyed. The news had to have been shocking to them. But interestingly, Jesus' followers didn't ask him about how he knew this was going to happen. They didn't say, "What? How do you know that? What do you mean?" They only asked him when this devastation was going to take place. They obviously had faith and trust in Jesus, believing him, believing his words, that this destruction was going to happen. They believed him. If Jesus said this temple was going to be destroyed, well, it was a done deal, but they wanted to know when to expect this event. Now, to give you some context here, so historically speaking, what's really interesting here is that Luke's gospel was written about 10 to 20 years after the Romans destroyed the temple in the year 70. The gospel was written after the destruction of the temple. So Jesus does successfully predict this future event. But this message This message is also a message of comfort and hope to Luke's audience, to those people who are hearing this message 10 or 20 years after the destruction of the temple. His message here is meant to encourage the people who are on the other side of that disaster, to encourage them on the other side of the disaster, and to encourage us on the other side of any disaster, really. There's a few more terrifying details, though, that we need to look at before we get to that hope and to that comfort. Jesus adds that all of these other awful things are going to happen. There's going to be false prophets, wars and insurrections, nations rising against nations, natural disasters, persecutions, even betrayals from friends and family. It will look like the end times. Now, scholars suggest that Jesus isn't predicting a particular future here, but just sort of how the world works in general. There's disasters. We can say that all the time. We see that every time you turn on the news. There are disasters. And when you see these things, Jesus says, don't be terrified. Don't be terrified, which, if you recall, is pretty standard response for Jesus. He's this tendency to offer peace in the midst of hard times, when his friends are freaking out on a boat amidst a storm, or where they're locking themselves inside a room after his resurrection, whenever the people around him are worried about the direction that things seem to be going, he says, peace be with you. Do not be afraid. Please don't feed the fears. And this isn't his only message. He also says that whatever cataclysmic events are coming, will give them an opportunity to testify. To testify. Now that seems like a pretty odd thing to say. Usually we think of testifying as something that we do when a prayer has been answered or when a life has been saved in some way. We typically don't think of everything falling apart as a time for testimony. And yet Jesus is clear that this is precisely when we should give an account of our faith. In the midst of catastrophe, we should give an account of our faith. And just what is our faith? In the words of the letter to the Hebrews, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, a conviction of things not seen. As followers of Jesus, we are called to hope in God's abiding presence and love, to hope in the resurrected life, to have hope for the least and the lost, to hope in the coming kingdom of heaven where our citizenship really is. Jesus calls us to testify to our hope. When everything's falling apart, how will you tell the story of your hope in something greater, in something greater than what we see in this present time? Like those who lost their beautiful temple, we are sometimes shaken by enormous events and division. Times were shaken by impending disaster. The world needs our hope and our source of hope, no matter what is happening. That's the call that comes from this biblical apocalypse. These prophecies are not meant to scare us, but to make us bold in our hope. There's a gift in this kind of apocalyptic thinking. And according to the late great preacher, Fred Craddock, he says this: such thinking should keep our souls athletically trim, free of the weight of excessive and useless things. He goes on to say, such thinking should aid us in keeping gains and losses in perspective. Such thinking should chase away the demons and cheer us with the news not only that today is a gift of God, but also that in some tomorrow we will stand in the presence of the Son of Man. Hope. Hope. Hope in the bigger picture is always more powerful than the present moment. Hope in the bigger picture is always more powerful than the present moment. So, if by chance, you ever get anxious about the future, by chance, then today's gospel is for you. If you ever get stuck in sort of this worry loop in your head about your own life, or about our community, or about our nation, or about our planet, Jesus' message is for you. Jesus' divine word of peace has the power to cut through our spinning thoughts and to remind us of God's faithful presence with us. And God waits for our response. Will we be faithful in return? Will we testify to our hope? Things can and do get rough. Sometimes there's an unplanned encounter with a bear in a national park, like the sign. Sometimes even grand temples fall. Whenever disaster strikes, or whenever we worry that it will, this false god of fear shows up. This false god of fear wants our allegiance. Fear wants to be fed. It wants to be in charge. But we get to choose. The prophet Joshua once spoke to Israel with these words: "Choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. As for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." The choice is ours. The choice is ours to serve our fear or to serve a steadfast God. So, from time to time, an apocalypse is a powerfully good reminder to not feed the fears. Don't feed the fears. Amen.